They say knowledge is power, but in New York City, power usually just looks like a tailored suit and a heavy bank account. Julian Sterling thought he owned the room. He thought the woman pouring his scotch was invisible, a nobody, just part of the furniture. He forced her to speak, just to make his rich friends laugh. He wanted a joke. Instead, he got a warning that would save his emir and destroy his ego. When a billionaire asks a waitress for investment advice, he expects silence. He certainly didn't expect her to predict the biggest market crash of the decade in 3 sentences. This is the story of the genius hiding in plain sight. The air inside the Gilded Cage, Manhattan's most exclusive members-only supper club, smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and fear. It was a Friday night, and the sharks were feeding. Clara adjusted the collar of her uniform, wincing as the stiff fabric dug into her neck. Her feet throbbed. She had been on the floor for 9 hours, moving like a ghost between tables of men who controlled the GDP of small nations. Her name tag read Clara, but to them, she was just sweetheart, honey, or simply more scotch. She balanced a tray of crystal tumblers, her eyes scanning the room. Table 4 was the problem tonight. Julian Sterling. Even among the elite, Julian was a titan. 34 years old, CEO of Sterling Vanguard, and currently the man on every Forbes cover. He was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. He was currently holding court with 3 other men, his nervous CFO Preston Cole, a potential investor from Dubai named Amir, and a sycophantic junior analyst. Clara approached the table, keeping her head down. She knew the drill: be efficient, be invisible. I'm telling you, Amir Julian's voice boomed, cutting through the ambient jazz. Aerotech Dynamics is the play. Their quarterly report is dropping Monday. They've got the new military contract locked down. It's a guaranteed 20% bump by Tuesday morning. I'm putting $50 million in at the opening bell. Preston, the CFO, nodded vigorously, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Julian is right. The technicals look flawless. The moving averages are converging beautifully. Clara froze for a split second as she placed a coaster down. Aerotech Dynamics. She knew that name. She knew it intimately. Last night, in her cramped studio apartment in Queens, surrounded by stacks of printed financial disclosures and highlighted 10K filings, she had read the footnotes of Aerotech's latest environmental impact statement. They didn't have the contract. There was a buried clause regarding a failed alloy stress test in the sub-supplier chain in Ohio. It wasn't in the headlines yet. It wasn't on Bloomberg. But it was there if you knew how to read the language of corporate obfuscation. If Julian bought on Monday, he was walking into a slaughterhouse. But she was just a waitress. She poured the Macallan 25. Her hand steady her face, a mask of indifference. More ice, Julian snapped, not looking at her. Of course, Sir Clara murmured. As she turned to leave, Julian's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. It wasn't aggressive, but it was firm, the grip of a man who was used to possessing things. The table went silent. Wait a minute, Julian said, a cruel glint in his eye. He was bored. The deal with Amir was dragging and he wanted entertainment. He looked at Clara, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the frayed hem of her sleeve, the dark circles under her eyes, the cheap shoes. You've been hovering around us all night, Julian drawled, loosening his tie. You've heard us talking. Billions. Tell me, darling, what do you do with your money? Hide it under a mattress. The junior analyst snickered. Amir looked uncomfortable. I manage, Sir Clara said quietly. trying to pull her wrist back. "Please, I need to get the ice." No, stay," Julian insisted, pulling a chair out with his foot. "Sit. Join the board meeting. Julian, stop it," Preston hissed. "We have business to discuss." "This is business, Preston. I want the common man's perspective. The Main Street view." Julian gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." It wasn't a request. In a place like the Gilded Cage, if a member like Julian Sterling told you to sit, you sat or you were fired before you reached the kitchen doors. Clara sat. She kept her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She felt the eyes of the entire room on her. The humiliation burned her cheeks. So Julian swirled his drink, leaning in. "We're talking about Aerotech Dynamics, big aerospace company. Planes, rockets. You know what a rocket is, right? I do," Clara said, her voice even. "Good girl. Now I'm about to buy a massive stake. Make myself a lot of money. My CFO here agrees. But I want to know, if you had $10 to your name, would you bet on the rocket company?" The table erupted in laughter. The junior analyst slapped the table. "God, Julian, you're terrible. I'm serious." Julian grinned, looking at Clara like she was a zoo animal. "Go on. Give the billionaire some investment advice. Tell us a joke." Clara looked at Julian. She saw the arrogance, the unchecked hubris. He was about to lose $50 million because he was too busy looking at the ceiling to check the foundation. She thought about her rent, which was 3 weeks late. She thought about her father rotting in a minimum security prison for a crime he didn't commit, a crime involving financial framing that she was desperately trying to unravel. She needed this job. "Don't do it," Clara, her internal voice, screamed. "Just smile, say something stupid and walk away." "I'm just a waitress, sir," she said softly. "Come on." Julian goaded, leaning closer. "Just a guess. Up or down, buy or sell. Entertain me." Clara looked at Preston, the CFO who should have done his due diligence. She looked at Amir, who was about to be dragged into a bad deal. And then she looked at Julian. Something inside her snapped. The exhaustion, the grief, the insult, it boiled over into a cold, hard clarity. "You want my advice?" Clara asked. Her voice changed. The servitude vanished, replaced by a tone of icy authority that didn't match her uniform. Julian blinked, surprised by the shift. "I do." "Short it," Clara said. The laughter at the table died instantly. It didn't taper off. It was severed. Julian's smile froze. He cocked his head to the side. "Excuse me?" "Short Aerotech," Clara repeated. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking Julian dead in the eye. "And do it heavily. Put leverage on it if your risk management team has the stomach for it." Preston, the CFO, scoffed, trying to recover the atmosphere. "Okay, very funny." She picked a word she heard on CNN. "Short it. Cute." Why, Julian asked. His voice was quieter now. The mockery was still there, but curiosity was creeping in. Why would you bet against a company with a new military contract? Clara stood up. She didn't want to sit anymore. If she was going to get fired, she was going to go out swinging. Because the contract is contingent on the Titan IV alloy, passing the stress threshold of 600 megapascals, Clara said. The numbers rolled off her tongue with machine gun speed. But if you read the footnote on page 142 of their 10Q filing from yesterday morning, specifically subsection C, paragraph 4, regarding supply chain logistics, you'd see they switched their supplier from Omicron Steel to a subsidiary in Ohio, called Red River Casting to cut costs by 4%. The table was dead silent. The only sound was the clinking of silverware from across the room. Preston's mouth was slightly open. Clara continued her rhythm, relentless. Red River Casting has a documented history of micro-fractures in their tungsten blends. The Titan 4 alloy failed the internal audit 3 days ago. The report hasn't been publicized, but the cancellation of the pre-order for the raw tungsten from Brazil is public record if you check the import manifests at the port of Newark. That order was cancelled Tuesday. She leaned over the table, resting her hands on the pristine white tablecloth. There is no contract, Mr. Sterling. The military is going to announce the failure on Monday afternoon. The stock won't jump 20%. It's going to crash by 40. If you put 50 million in at the bell, you'll be down 20 million by lunch. She straightened up, smoothed her apron, and picked up the empty glass from the table. But what do I know? Clara said, her voice dropping back to a whisper. I'm just the girl who gets the ice. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Julian stared at her. His brain was racing, trying to process the data dump he had just received. Page 142. Import manifests Red River Casting. It was too specific to be a lie. It was too detailed to be a guess. Preston was the first to break the silence. He turned red, his ego bruised. This is ridiculous. She's obviously insane. Where is the manager, Henri? Preston snapped his fingers. Henri, the floor manager, rushed over, looking panicked. Mr. Sterling, is everything all right? Is this girl bothering you? She's harassing the guests. Preston spat. Spouting nonsense. Get her out of here. Henri grabbed Clara's arm roughly. Clara, I told you to keep your mouth shut. You're done. Get your things and get out. Now. Clara didn't resist. She didn't look at Henri. She looked at Julian one last time. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He had pulled out his phone. His thumbs were flying across the screen accessing the Bloomberg terminal app, so Henri asked, waiting for Julian to condemn her. Julian didn't look up. He was staring at his screen, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. Get her out, Henri Preston demanded. Go, Henri hissed, shoving Clara toward the kitchen. Clara walked away. She held her head high, marching through the swinging doors into the noise and steam of the kitchen. She untied her apron, threw it in the laundry bin, and grabbed her purse. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing reality. She had just lost her job. She had no rent money. She walked out the back alley door into the cool New York night. She took a deep breath of exhaust fumes and rain, trying to stop the tears from falling. It was over. She had let her pride win, and now she would pay the price. Back inside the Gilded Cage, the atmosphere at table 4 had shifted from celebration to funeral. Julian put the phone away. Preston said nervously. She was just a crazy waitress. Probably read a conspiracy blog. Julian held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes were glued to a PDF file on his phone, the Aerotech 10Q filing. He scrolled to page 142, Supply Chain Modification, Red River Casting. He switched apps to a logistics tracker he paid $50,000 a year to access. He searched for Brazilian tungsten exports. Cancelled. Tuesday. Origin Rio. Destination Newark, Red River. Julian felt a chill go down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He slowly lowered the phone. Preston. Julian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Yes, Julian. Why did a waitress know about the Red River casting switch? and my chief financial officer did not. Preston paled. It's a minor detail, Julian. It's buried in the... It's a detail that would have cost me $20 million. Julian slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. The entire restaurant turned to look. Julian stood up, grabbing his jacket. Julian, where are you going? Amir asked, bewildered. We haven't ordered mains. Dinner is cancelled, Julian snapped. Preston, get back to the office. Tear that aerotech file apart. If she's right, I want to know within the hour. And you? Preston asked. Julian was already moving toward the door, his eyes scanning the room, looking for the kitchen exit. I'm going to find the waitress. Clara didn't have an umbrella. The New York drizzle had turned into a steady, miserable rain by the time she reached the subway station on 5th Avenue. She swiped her Metro card. Insufficient fare. Perfect, she whispered, resting her forehead against the cool metal of the turnstile. Just perfect. She checked her pockets. $3 in change. Enough for a bus if she walked 6 blocks to the stop. She turned around and headed back up the stairs to the street, pulling her thin cardigan tighter around herself. A black Maybach screeched to a halt at the curb, splashing a puddle of water onto the sidewalk, narrowly missing her shoes. The rear door flew open before the car even fully stopped. Get in, a voice commanded. Clara jumped back, her heart hammering. She recognized the voice. She recognized the car. I said get in, Julian. Sterling repeated. He was sitting in the back, the interior light illuminating his sharp features. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked intense, like a hound that had caught a scent. I'm not getting in your car, Clara said, backing away. You got me fired. Isn't that enough? Julian stepped out of the car. He was tall, looming over her in the rain. He didn't seem to care that his $2,000 Italian suit was getting wet. You were right, he said. Clara stopped. What I checked the import manifests. I checked the footnotes. You were right. Aerotech is a lemon. Julian took a step closer. Who are you? I'm Clara Jenkins. I was a waitress. Now I'm unemployed. No. Julian shook his head. Clara Jenkins serves pasta and spills wine. Clara Jenkins doesn't memorize 10Q filings and cross-reference them with global shipping logistics. Who are you? Clara looked away. Leave me alone, Mr. Sterling. You have your money. Go celebrate. She tried to walk past him, but he blocked her path. He wasn't touching her, but his presence was a wall. I don't like mysteries, Julian said, and I really don't like being smarter than everyone in the room, only to find out the smartest person was refilling my water glass. How did you know I read? Clara said defensively. Nobody reads the footnotes, Clara. Not even the analysts I pay $500,000 a year. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He uncapped a fountain pen. I owe you a consulting fee. You saved me $20 million. What's your rate? 5,000. 10. He scribbled on the check and held it out. Clara looked at the check. It was more money than she had made in the last 3 months. Her hand twitched. She wanted to take it. God, she needed to take it. But then she thought about Preston's sneer. She thought about the way Julian had called her a joke. I don't want your charity, Clara said, her voice shaking with a mixture of pride and cold. Julian paused. He looked at the check, then at her wet clothes, her defiant eyes. He laughed, a short, dry sound. It's not charity. It's payment for services rendered. I didn't do it for you, Clara snapped. I did it to shut you up. Julian's eyes widened slightly. He slowly tore the check out of the book. But instead of handing it to her, he ripped it in half, then in quarters. He let the pieces fall into the puddle. "You have pride," Julian said, nodding as if he had just discovered a rare diamond. "Dangerous. Stupid but rare." He opened the car door again. "I have a proposition. Not charity. A job." Clara scoffed. "I'm not scrubbing your floors. I don't need a maid. I need a brain. Preston is useless. My analysts are sheep. You saw a fracture in a billion-dollar deal from the sidelines." Julian gestured to the plush leather seat. "Come to my office Monday morning, 8:00 a.m. Sterling Vanguard. We'll see if you're a one-hit wonder or the real deal. And if I refuse, then you can walk to your bus stop in the rain and keep serving people who aren't half as smart as you are. Your choice." Julian got back in the car and slammed the door. The window rolled down halfway. "Here," he said, tossing a small black umbrella out the window. It landed at her feet. 8:00 a.m. "Clara, don't be late." The Maybach sped off, disappearing into the New York traffic. Clara stood there for a long time, staring at the umbrella. It had the Sterling Vanguard logo on the handle in silver. She picked it up. It was heavy, expensive. She thought about her father's letters from prison. "Keep your head down, Clara. Don't let them know who you really are. The people who framed me, they'll come for you too." Taking a job at Sterling Vanguard was dangerous. It put her in the spotlight. It put her in the Shark Tank. But it also put her close to the money, close to the data, close to the power she needed to prove her father's innocence. Clara opened the umbrella. 8:00 a.m. She whispered to the empty street. The Sterling Vanguard tower rose like a shard of black glass piercing the Manhattan sky. At 7:55 a.m., Clara stood at the base of the building, her neck craning back to see the top. She wore her only blazer, a charcoal thrift store find that she had steamed 3 times the night before, and a pair of sensible black heels. She felt small. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and intimidation. Men in $5,000 suits marched through the security gates like soldiers of fortune, barking into headsets. Clara approached the front desk. The receptionist, a woman with hair so tight it looked painful, didn't even look up. "Name, Clara Jenkins. I have a meeting with Mr. Sterling." The receptionist paused. Her eyes flicked up, scanning Clara's outfit with a microscopic sneer. She typed slowly into her computer. "I don't have a Clara Jenkins on the visitor log. Deliveries are around the back." "I'm not a delivery," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the flutter in her stomach. "Mr. Sterling asked me to be here at 8. Mr. Sterling doesn't schedule appointments with—" The receptionist gestured vaguely at Clara's entire existence. "Unlisted individuals. Please leave before I call security." Clara checked the clock on the wall. 7:58 a.m. If she was late, Julian would dismiss her. It was a test. The first test was just getting through the door. "Call his office," Clara demanded. "I will certainly not problem Linda." A smooth voice cut through the air. Preston Cole stepped off the elevator. He looked fresh, rested, and smelled of expensive cologne and malice. He stopped in front of the desk, looking Clara up and down with a smirk. "Mr. Cole," the receptionist beamed. "This woman claims she has a meeting with the CEO." "Ah, yes, the waitress," Preston chuckled. "Let her up, Linda. Julian is in a charitable mood this morning. We're calling it his community outreach project." Clara didn't flinch. She stared right at Preston. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. I see you haven't been fired yet." Julian must be forgiving. Preston's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed into slits. He leaned in close, his voice a low hiss only she could hear. "Listen to me, you little gutter rat. You got lucky last night. You made a lucky guess. But this building isn't a restaurant. There are no menus here, only sharks. If you step one toe out of line, I will bury you so deep you'll need a mining permit to find a job at McDonald's." "After you," Clara said, gesturing to the elevators. The ride up to the 80th floor was silent and suffocating. When the doors opened, Clara stepped into a world of chaotic brilliance. The trading floor was a hive of activity screens flashing red and green, analysts shouting across desks, the hum of millions of dollars moving every second. Preston led her past the bullpen to a corner office with glass walls. Julian Sterling was inside, standing by the window looking out at the city he helped rule. "She's here," Preston announced, not bothering to knock. Julian turned. He looked impeccable, energized. "Right on time. Coffee." "I'm fine," Clara said. "Good. Caffeine makes you jittery. You need steady hands today." Julian walked over to his massive mahogany desk and picked up a thick, leather-bound folder. He dropped it onto the glass coffee table with a heavy thud. "Preston says you're a fraud," Julian said casually, sitting on the edge of his desk. "He ran a background check on you at 4:00 a.m. Clara Jenkins, 24 years old. Dropout from Brooklyn College. Majored in mathematics before. Financial difficulties forced you out. Worked 3 diner jobs in 2 years. Father is..." Julian paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "Well, let's leave family out of it for a moment. The point is, on paper, you are unqualified to empty the trash bins here, let alone touch a terminal." Clara felt a cold spike in her chest at the mention of her father. Preston had dug deep. "Paper doesn't trade stocks, Mr. Sterling," Clara said. "People do." "Exactly." Julian smiled. "Which is why you're here. I'm giving you a trial run. 1 day. If you survive, you get a contract. If you fail, you go back to the apron." He pointed to the folder on the table. "That is the Graveyard Portfolio. It's a collection of 20 mid-cap companies that our analysts have flagged as holds or sells. Dead weight, boring, low yield." Julian checked his watch. "It is now 8:15 a.m. You have until the market closes at 4:00 p.m. Go through those files. Find me one diamond, one company that everyone else is wrong about. If you find it, and you can prove it, you're hired." "And if they're all actually garbage," Clara asked, "then you tell me that. But you better be right. Because if you tell me to sell and the stock jumps tomorrow, you're done." Preston laughed from the doorway. "She won't last until lunch. The terminology alone will crush her." Julian ignored him. "There is a spare desk in the analyst pit. Use Terminal 14. Your login is guest. Password is good luck. Now get out of my office." Clara grabbed the heavy folder. She could feel Preston's eyes boring into her back as she walked out. "She's a liability, Julian," Preston argued as the door closed. "No, Preston," Julian murmured, watching Clara navigate the sea of desks. "She's a wild card, and I've been playing with a stacked deck for too long. I want to see what happens when we introduce a little chaos." The analyst pit was a battlefield. Clara found Terminal 14 in the back corner, squeezed between a printer and a vending machine. The chair was broken. It leaned permanently to the left. As she sat down, she felt the stares. The other analysts were mostly men in their late 20s, Ivy League graduates with arrogance stamped on their foreheads. They whispered and snickered as she opened the thick folder. "Is that the waitress I heard she spilled a drink on Sterling and he hired her as a joke? $10 she cries before noon." Clara tuned them out. She opened the folder. Biogenics, North Star Shipping, Cavalman Pharmaceuticals. It was a mess of data. Balance sheets, income statements, projected earnings. To anyone else, it was a wall of numbers. To Clara, it was a story. She had a gift. She didn't just see the numbers. She saw the patterns connecting them. It was like chess. Every number was a move, every discrepancy a trap. She started working. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up historical charts on the Bloomberg terminal. By 11:00 a.m., she had discarded 15 of the 20 companies. They were truly dead, bad management, shrinking markets, excessive debt. Then she found Viridian Health. It was a boring company. They made hospital beds and surgical gloves. The stock had been flat for 3 years. The Sterling Vanguard report, written by a senior analyst named Chad, recommended a sell. The reasoning: market saturation. No innovation. But Clara saw something odd in the cash flow statement. There was a recurring payment every quarter to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, categorized under R&D consultation. It was small, $2 million a quarter, but it was consistent, and it matched the exact amount of a grant Viridian had received from the government for advanced polymer research 4 years ago. She dug deeper. She cross-referenced the patent filings. Viridian wasn't just making gloves. They had filed a vague patent 6 months ago for a self-healing synthetic dermis, artificial skin. If this was real, it wasn't a boring medical supply company. It was a revolution in trauma care. The stock wouldn't just go up, it would explode. But she needed proof. The patent was vague. She needed to know if the R&D consultation was actually paying for clinical trials that they were keeping off the books to avoid a stock dip if they failed. She reached for the phone to call the patent office clerk, a contact she had made while helping her father with his legal appeals. Suddenly her screen went black. Clara blinked. She tapped the keyboard. Nothing. "Whoops," a voice drawled from behind her. She turned around. A young analyst with slicked-back hair, Chad, the one who wrote the report on Viridian, was leaning against the wall holding a power cord. He had unplugged her terminal. "Careful there, sweetheart," Chad smirked. "You don't want to overheat the system. These machines are for professionals." The pit erupted in laughter. "Plug it back in," Clara said, her voice low. "Or what?" Chad laughed, tossing the cord on the floor. "You'll refill my coffee, look. Save yourself the embarrassment. Just pack up and go. You don't belong here. You smell like diner grease." Clara looked at the cord, then at the clock. 1:30 p.m. She had lost her unsaved work. The notes on Viridian were gone from the screen. She stood up slowly. The room went quiet, expecting a fight or tears. Clara walked past Chad. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked straight to the printer, grabbed a stack of paper, and then sat back down. She pulled a pen from her purse. If they were going to cut her technology, she would do it the old-fashioned way. She had a photographic memory. She remembered the numbers. She spent the next 2 hours writing furiously by hand. She reconstructed the cash flow analysis. She drew the charts on the back of the printer paper. She calculated the potential valuation of the synthetic skin patent using a calculator watch she had bought for $5. At 3:45 p.m., the elevator chimed. Julian Sterling walked onto the floor, followed by Preston. "Time's up," Julian announced, clapping his hands. The entire floor went silent. He walked over to Clara's desk. He saw the black screen. He saw the unplugged cord. He saw Chad smirking in the corner. Julian's face tightened, but he didn't address the sabotage. He looked at Clara, Well, Julian asked. The terminal is off. Did you give up? I don't need the terminal, Clara said, standing up. She held out a stack of messy, handwritten papers. Preston scoffed. Handwritten? Is this a joke? This is a professional investment firm, not a third-grade art class. Read it, Clara said, shoving the papers at Julian. Julian took them. He scanned the first page. His eyebrows lifted. He flipped to the second page, then the third. He stopped at the calculation of the Cayman Island payments. Viridian Health, Julian read aloud. You think a bed maker is the diamond. It's not a bed maker, Clara said, her voice projecting across the silent room so everyone could hear. They are hiding a Phase 3 trial for synthetic skin. They are funneling the costs through a shell company to keep the R&D burn rate off the main balance sheet. The trial results are due next week. If it succeeds, they own the market for burn victims and trauma surgery. The stock is trading at $12. It's worth $85. Preston snatched the paper from Julian. Synthetic skin. That's science fiction. And this Cayman connection, this is pure speculation. You're hallucinating. Am I? Clara pointed to a line on her paper. The signatory for the shell company is Dr. Aris Thorne. He is also the chief medical officer of Viridian. It's a conflict of interest, but it proves the connection. They are betting the farm on this product. Julian looked at Chad. Chad, you cover Viridian. Did you know about Dr. Thorne's connection to the shell company? Chad turned pale. I didn't think it was relevant, sir. It looked like a standard tax haven. You didn't look, Julian corrected coldly. You saw a boring company and you stopped working. Julian turned back to Clara. He looked at the unplugged cord on the floor, then at her defiant face. A slow smile spread across his face. Preston, Julian said, without looking away from Clara. Yes, Julian. I'll have security escort her out. No, Julian said. Fire, Chad. The room gasped. Chad's jaw dropped. What, sir? You unplugged her machine because you were threatened. Julian said, his voice ice cold. And you missed a potential 600% return because you were lazy. Pack your things. Julian looked at Clara. You found the diamond, and you did it with a pen and a broken chair. He extended his hand. Welcome to Sterling Vanguard, Clara. You're not a consultant anymore. You're my new Senior Analyst. Clara looked at his hand. She looked at Preston, who looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. She shook Julian's hand. I have one condition, Clara said. Julian laughed. You've been hired for 10 seconds and you're making demands. Go on. I want an office, she said, glancing at Preston, with a lock on the door, and I want access to the archives. Preston's head snapped up. The archives, that's restricted data. Historical merger files. Why would you need that? The archives held the old records. The records from 10 years ago. The records that contained the truth about the financial scandal that had framed her father. Clara smiled, a dangerous, sharp smile that matched the shark tank she was now swimming in. I like history, she said innocently. I want to learn from the company's past mistakes. Julian studied her for a moment. He saw something in her eyes, an agenda, but he was too intrigued to stop it. Done, Julian said. Give her the keys, Preston. As Preston reluctantly handed over a key card, his fingers brushed hers. He leaned in his voice, a whisper again. You're playing a dangerous game, Waitress. The archives have ghosts. You might not like what you find. I don't believe in ghosts, Mr. Cole, Clara whispered back, clutching the keycard like a weapon. I believe in audits. 3 weeks later, Clara Jenkins was no longer invisible. In the hallways of Sterling Vanguard, She was a rumor made flesh. They called her the Oracle behind her back, though to her face they simply nodded with a mixture of respect and terror. Since the Viridian health stock had skyrocketed, exactly as she predicted, Julian had moved her desk right outside his office. But Clara wasn't there for the praise. She was there for the key card in her pocket. It was the night of the Vanguard Winter Gala. The entire firm was descending upon the Metropolitan Museum of Art for a night of champagne and self-congratulation. For Clara, it was the perfect distraction. While the eyes of the company were fixed on black ties and caviar, the physical archives in the sub-basement of the Sterling Tower would be empty. "You're still in your work clothes," a voice observed from the doorway. Clara looked up from her screens. Julian Sterling was leaning against the doorframe. He looked devastating in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her father's legal defense fund. "I have work to do, Julian. I'm skipping the party." "Incorrect." Julian walked into the room. He snapped his fingers, and 2 assistants bustled in, carrying a garment bag and a shoebox. "You are the face of our new strategy. If you aren't there, investors get nervous. And when investors get nervous, the stock drops. Put the dress on Clara. That's an order." Clara gritted her teeth. "I am an analyst, not a show pony. Tonight you are both." Julian's voice dropped, losing its playful edge. "Preston has been meeting with board members privately. I don't know what he's planning, but I need you by my side. I need your eyes. You see things I miss." He left the room before she could argue. Clara opened the bag. It was a gown of midnight blue silk, sleek and severe, with a neckline that was both modest and commanding. It was armor masquerading as fashion. An hour later, Clara stood in the lobby of the museum holding a flute of champagne she didn't intend to drink. The room was a sea of power, but her mind was on the timer she had set on her watch. At 9:00 p.m., the CEO's speech would begin. That gave her a 20-minute window where security would be minimal at the office tower across town. She waited until Julian took the stage. The lights dimmed. The spotlight hit him, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began his charisma filling the massive hall. "They told us this year would be a recession. We told them it would be a revolution." Clara slipped into the shadows of the Egyptian wing. She kicked off her heels, shoved them into her purse, and ran out the service exit. 20 minutes later, she was back at Sterling Vanguard. The lobby was deserted. The night guard, an older man named Earl, she had befriended with coffee, waved her through, thinking she had forgotten files for the gala. She took the service elevator down. B2. The archives. The air was stale and cold. Rows of metal shelves stretched into the darkness, filled with boxes dating back decades. This was the paper trail, the documents too sensitive to digitize or too old to bother. Clara turned on her phone's flashlight. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was looking for records from 5 years ago, the year her father, Robert Jenkins, a mid-level accountant at a logistics firm called Omnicorp, was arrested for embezzling $4 million. He hadn't taken a dime. He had been the fall guy for a massive money laundering scheme involving a shell company. Clara found the aisle, OP. She scanned the boxes. Omnicorp. Omnicorp. There. A dusty box on the bottom shelf. She tore the lid off. Her hands shook as she sifted through the files. Invoices, shipping manifests, and then a red folder labeled Project Anchor, Confidential. She opened it. It was the smoking gun. It detailed the wire transfers. The $4 million hadn't gone to her father's account. It had been routed through a temporary holding account under her father's name, set up without his knowledge, and then immediately funneled into a private equity fund. The fund was managed by Sterling Vanguard. No. Clara whispered, her breath hitching. She flipped the page to the authorization sheet. Who signed off on the transfer? Who accepted the dirty money? She saw the signature at the bottom of the page. It was bold, sweeping, and undeniable. Authorized by Julian Sterling. The room spun. Clara leaned against the metal shelving, clutching the file to her chest. Julian. He wasn't just the arrogant billionaire who gave her a job. He was the man who had signed the death warrant on her father's freedom. He had taken the laundered money to boost his quarterly earnings and let an innocent man rot in a cell to cover the tracks. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and angry. All this time she had been working for the enemy. She had actually started to respect him. She had started to believe he was different from the sharks like Preston. But he was the biggest shark of them all. She pulled out her phone and took high-resolution photos of every page. She shoved the file back into the box, arranged it exactly as she found it, and stood up. She had the evidence. She could go to the FBI. She could destroy him. But as she walked back to the elevator, a cold realization hit her. If she went to the FBI now, Julian's lawyers would bury it. They would claim forgery or negligence. They would destroy her credibility. No. She needed to be smarter. She needed to hurt him where he lived. She needed to take down his company from the inside piece by piece until he had nothing left to hide behind. Clara wiped her face, fixed her hair, and stepped into the elevator. She pressed the button for the lobby. She was going back to the gala. She was going to smile and dance and shake his hand. And she was going to watch him fall. The gala was in full swing when Clara returned. She had managed to slip back in through the side entrance, smoothing the silk of her dress. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She found Julian near the ice sculpture, surrounded by a circle of laughing investors. When he saw her, his face lit up. He excused himself and walked over to her. "I thought you bolted," Julian said, handing her a fresh glass of water. "You disappeared during my speech." "Everything all right?" Clara looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the charm, the easy grace, the intelligence in his eyes. And for the first time, she saw a monster. "I just needed some air." Clara lied, her voice steady. The room was stifling. "It is," Julian agreed, loosening his bow tie slightly. "It's a room full of vultures waiting to see if I trip. Come on, dance with me. It'll annoy Preston." "I don't dance," Clara said stiffly. "It's a waltz, Clara. It's just math set to music." "You're good at math." He took her hand before she could pull away and led her onto the floor. The orchestra began to play. Julian placed a hand on her waist. His touch burned through the silk. As they moved, Clara felt a wave of nausea. She was dancing with the man who ruined her family. "You're tense," Julian murmured, leaning in close so only she could hear. "What happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," Clara said coldly. "Or maybe I just realized that everyone in this room is wearing a mask." Julian pulled back slightly, studying her face. His eyes narrowed. He was perceptive, dangerously so. "Did Preston say something to you?" Julian asked, his voice hardening. "If he threatened you." "It's not Preston," Clara snapped. "It's—" "Never mind." Suddenly the music stopped. It wasn't a natural end to the song. The sound system screeched with feedback, and the lights in the ballroom slammed on to full brightness, killing the mood instantly. A hush fell over the crowd. On the massive projection screen behind the stage, the Sterling Vanguard logo disappeared. It was replaced by the logo of Apex Capital, a ruthless rival hedge fund known for stripping companies for parts. Preston Cole walked onto the stage. He wasn't smiling. He looked triumphant. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston announced, his voice booming. "I'm afraid the festivities are over. As of 10 minutes ago, Apex Capital, in coordination with a majority coalition of the board of directors, has initiated a vote of no confidence in the current CEO, Julian Sterling." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, and the frantic clicking of press cameras. Julian froze mid-step. He let go of Clara and turned toward the stage. Preston continued pointing a finger at Julian. "Under Mr. Sterling's leadership, this firm has engaged in reckless speculation. But more importantly, we have uncovered evidence of financial mismanagement dating back 5 years. To protect the shareholders, we are seizing control." Clara's heart stopped. Financial mismanagement dating back 5 years. Preston knew. Preston wasn't just staging a coup. He was using the exact crime Clara had just uncovered to do it. But he wasn't doing it to get justice for her father. He was doing it to steal the company. Julian strode toward the stage, his face a mask of fury. "Preston, get away from that mic. You're fired." "You can't fire me, Julian," Preston sneered. "You don't have the votes. It's over. Security is already escorting your team out of the building." 2 large security guards stepped in front of Julian, blocking his path. Julian turned, looking for an ally. He looked at the investors they were backing away. He looked at his board members. They were looking at their shoes. Then he looked at Clara. He looked vulnerable. For the first time, the Titan was mortal. Clara stood alone on the dance floor. Her hand was clutching her purse, where the phone with the incriminating photos sat. If she stayed silent, Preston would destroy Julian. Julian would go to prison for the fraud. Her father would be avenged. It was exactly what she wanted. But then Preston descended the stairs and walked straight toward Clara. He stopped inches from her, blocking Julian's view. "Hello, Miss Jenkins," Preston whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. Or should I say, Miss Robert Jenkins. Clara went rigid. "Did you think I didn't know?" Preston chuckled darkly. "I knew the moment I saw your resume. I just let you stay to see what you'd find. You found the file tonight, didn't you, the anchor file?" Clara didn't answer. "Here is how this works," Preston hissed. "You are going to hand over that phone. You are going to testify that Julian ordered the wire transfers alone. If you do that, I might let your father out early on good behavior. I have pull with the parole board." "And if I don't?" Clara asked. "Then I'll release the rest of the documents." Preston smiled. "The ones that show your father didn't just sign the checks, he created the accounts. Fake documents, of course, planted by me years ago. But they're very convincing. Your father won't just stay in prison, he'll die there, and you'll be in the cell next to him for corporate espionage." Preston stepped back, raising his voice so the room could hear. "Miss Jenkins, as Julian's personal analyst, surely you can confirm these erratic financial decisions." The room turned to Clara. Hundreds of eyes. The cameras zoomed in. Julian was looking at her, confused, betrayed, and desperate. He saw Preston whispering to her. He saw the fear in her eyes. "Clara," Julian asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara looked at Julian. She looked at Preston. She realized the truth. Julian's signature on that document. It was too bold, too clean. He didn't sign it. Preston had forged it. Preston had framed her father, and he had used Julian's authority to do it without Julian ever knowing. Julian wasn't the villain. He was the scapegoat, just like her father. If Preston took over the company tonight, the evidence would disappear forever. Preston would burn the archives. Her father would never be free. Clara took a deep breath. She stepped forward into the spotlight. "I can't confirm that Mr. Cole," Clara said, her voice ringing out clear and sharp as breaking glass. Preston's smile faltered. "Excuse me." Clara reached into her purse. She didn't pull out her phone. She pulled out the crumpled piece of paper she had kept from her first day, the handwritten analysis of Viridian Health. "I can't confirm it," Clara said, walking toward the microphone. "Because you are lying." She turned to the crowd. "My name is Clara Jenkins, and I'm not just a waitress. I'm the Senior Analyst of Sterling Vanguard, and I'm about to show you exactly who Preston Cole really is." The ballroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Clara stood at the podium, her phone clutched in her hand. Preston Cole took a step toward her, his face twisting into a snarl. "Cut the mic!" Preston shouted to the sound booth. "She's hysterical, security!" But Julian Sterling moved faster. He stepped in front of the sound technician, crossing his arms. "Let her speak," Julian commanded. His voice was low, dangerous, and carried the weight of the man who still owned the building. Clara didn't waste a second. She pulled the HDMI cable from the podium laptop and jammed it into her phone adapter. The massive screen behind her flickered. The Apex Capital logo vanished. In its place appeared a high-resolution photo of a document, Project Anchor. Authorization. "This," Clara said, her voice booming through the speakers, "is the document Preston claims proves Julian Sterling embezzled $4 million 5 years ago. It's the same document that sent my father, Robert Jenkins, to prison." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. "Look at the date," Clara pointed to the screen. "October 14th, 2020. And look at the signature. It looks like Julian's, doesn't it?" Preston lunged for her, but 2 board members held him back. Their curiosity piqued. "But there is a problem," Clara continued, turning to look at Julian. "Julian, where were you on October the 14th, 2020? Julian stared at the screen, his eyes widening as the realization hit him like a physical blow. He stepped forward. "I was in unstable condition at Mount Sinai Hospital," Julian said, his voice ringing out. "I had been in a motorcycle accident the day before. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days. My hands were broken." The crowd gasped. Clara swiped her phone screen. A new image appeared, Julian's medical records, which she had pulled from the archive's insurance files just minutes ago. "A man in a coma cannot sign a wire transfer," Clara declared. "But a CFO, with power of attorney, can." She swiped again. This time, it was a complex web of bank transfers. Preston didn't just forge the signature to frame Julian today. He did it 5 years ago to steal the money for himself. He routed the $4 million through my father's accounts to make him the fall guy, and then moved it to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Clara zoomed in on the final destination of the funds. The shell corporation is Bluefin Holdings, and the registered owner of Bluefin Holdings. She swiped one last time. A copy of a passport appeared on the screen. "Is Preston Cole?" The room erupted. Flashbulbs went off like a strobe light storm. It was chaos. Preston stood frozen. His face was grey. The game was over. He turned to run, shoving a waiter aside, but the security guards, the same ones he had ordered to remove Julian, blocked his path. They weren't loyal to Preston. They were loyal to the winning side. And Preston had just lost everything. "Get him out of my sight," Julian said, his voice cold as absolute zero. As the police arrived to handcuff a screaming Preston Cole. Julian walked up to the podium. He didn't look at the press. He didn't look at the board. He looked at Clara. She was trembling now, the adrenaline fading. She looked small in her gown, exhausted but standing tall. Julian took the microphone gently from her hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said to the stunned room, "Sterling Vanguard is under new management, but not Preston's." He took Clara's hand and raised it. "I'd like you to meet my partner, the woman who just saved this company, and the smartest person in the room." 2 days later, the gates of the correctional facility opened. Clara stood by the chain-link fence, the wind whipping her hair. A black Maybach was parked behind her, engine idling. The metal door buzzed. A man walked out, blinking in the sunlight. He looked older, thinner, but it was him. Robert Jenkins. "Dad!" Clara screamed, running forward. They collided in a hug that knocked the wind out of both of them. Clara cried into his shoulder, the weight of the last 5 years finally lifting off her chest. "You did it," her father sobbed. "My girl, you did it." Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I had help." She turned. Julian was leaning against the car, smiling. He walked over, extending a hand to her father. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm Julian Sterling. I can't give you back the time you lost, but I can promise you that the settlement my lawyers have prepared will ensure you never have to work another day in your life, and I've already arranged for your record to be completely expunged." Robert looked at the billionaire, then at his daughter. "She's quite something, isn't she?" "She's a genius," Julian corrected. He looked at Clara, his eyes soft. "She sees things no one else does." Clara smiled, squeezing her father's hand. "I'm not a genius, Julian. I just read us the footnotes." "Well?" Julian opened the back door of the car for them. "We have a board meeting in an hour, and I need my partner there. I'm thinking of buying a tungsten mine in Brazil, but I won't touch it unless you look at the manifest first." Clara laughed a real free laugh. She got into the car. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was Clara Jenkins, and she had just closed the biggest deal of her life. And that is how a nobody waitress took down a corrupt empire with nothing but a sharp mind and a little bit of karma. Julian Sterling learned the hard way that you never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly never underestimate the person pouring your coffee. If you enjoyed this story of justice betrayal and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. What would you do if you found a secret file that could destroy your boss? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.